Prince of Persia is an extremely flawed game that looks like it's going to give you a whole basket of opportunities, and then yanks them away from you as you wade into its shallow, kiddie pool-sized gameplay. While the game boasts some magnificent eye candy, and points where it shows some true heart, the game's core aspects of gameplay are the anchor that sinks the ship. Alright, so boom, there's this unnamed guy in the desert looking for his donkey, and out of nowhere he runs into a princess being chased by some guards, and oh look, she has magical powers, and whoopsie doodles, looks like an unspeakable evil has been unleashed into the world. There, I summarized the opening sequence of the game, and trust me, I really did not miss many details there. So as the game starts out, the prince and his new companion, Princess Elika, are off to heal the fertile grounds in every area to seal the recently escaped evil god Ahriman. Armed with the prince's acrobatics and Elika's never-ending supply of insane, game-breaking magical powers, the two venture off to traverse tricks and traps in the quest to restore the world they live in. Prince of Cel-Shading looks to have a non-linear environment for you to explore, but it's really not all that's cracked up to be. In reality, the game is nothing more than an open-world rail shooter with quick-time events as its gameplay. It becomes extremely obvious early on that the depth of jumping around as the prince is shallow. All the actions he performs require minimal input from the player. Want to wall run? Move forward and press A. Want to crawl on the ceiling? Press A. Want to climb up a wall? Jump at it by pressing A. If you're feeling a little advanced, you can flex your gaming skills by pressing B to swing from a randomly mounted ring, but make sure you warm up first, otherwise you might strain a hand muscle doing something so complicated. All of these actions kind of auto-track the prince to the obstacle he's traversing, which would make exploration a pain, if there was any. There's only ever one path for you to take through the level, so you'll just end up chugging along rhythmically pressing A, B, and Y, and occasionally using the analog stick. And you don't even need to do that. If it's something like grabbing a ring or activating a plate, there's such a large window for that input, and there's no penalty for the wrong input, that you can just roll your face on the buttons until you hit the right one. It's mind-numbingly basic. No, seriously, look at this. If you learned anything from that clip, it's that the gameplay is so basic and that chugging Stella Artois was a little harder than I thought. Combat isn't much better. Fights are always 1v1, and the intention was to make them more of a fulfilled aspect to the game. Like you don't just go through and mash buttons and beat a whole bunch of dudes kind of thing. The prince has options in these fights. Attacking with a sword has range, but can be parried or punished if you whiff it. The gauntlet throws them in the air, but requires you to be close. And Elika can attack them with magic, but needs to be at the correct range as well. You can also extend combos with acrobatic feats and parry your opponent's attack for an opening. While there looks to be depth in this, the combat kind of falls flat until the end. You insta-kill a one-off enemy by comboing them into the corner of the fighting area, and since this game is built the same way as the overworld of Skies of Arcadia, all of these platforms are rather small, and it only takes one simple combo to kill them. As the game progresses, more and more combat elements are introduced, like having your controls reversed, having to start a combo with specifically the gauntlet or Elika, or enemies spitting goo into your face to partially obstruct your vision. These make combat more enjoyable towards the end, but the basic plan is still the same. Parry and attack, perform your heaviest hitting combo, repeat. Combat getting better parallels how platforming starts bad and only gets worse. By the time you heal the second fertile ground, which by the way is done with a QTE, check this out, extremely weak. You've pretty much learned 80% of what the game is going to throw at you. Every platforming sequence is some dull combination of running on a wall, sliding down an incline, gripping vines, yada 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 yada. All of it is just so boring to do. Not to mention, since it's all based on this one track to get through the level, it ends up feeling rigid and inflexible. The game ends up slowly adding 4 more obstacles to impede your progress, but only the wall tentacles and the moving wall blobs actually affect the gameplay, and they more or less do the same thing. You can also unlock 4 abilities for Elika once you have enough light seeds, more on those later, to help access new locations, but these are so dumb that I just have to stop and talk about them. So all around the world are these little circular magic plates in either green, blue, yellow, or red, and you use them the same way you would grip a ring, but you press Y instead of B. Each one has Elika perform some wild magical power. The green one gives the prince the ability to run on walls and ceilings. The blue one has Elika swing through the air and toss the prince. The yellow one has the prince grab Elika by the shoulders as the game turns into an actual rail shooter minus the shooting. And the red one performs the exact same function as those number pads from Sonic Adventure 1. For starters, the red and blue pads offer the exact same function. Press Y and Elika will launch you to someplace else. Yay for redundancy. The yellow pad actually switches gameplay up by having you fly through the air like an R-wing, but the effects they use are distracting and the pathing is annoying and it looks and feels stupid. The green pad is the only worthwhile one, as it adds a new aspect to gameplay, running against gravity, with minor setbacks or stupidity. The only complaint with that one is that sometimes the objects you bump into aren't all that clearly defined in terms of hitboxes, but whatever, it's an extremely minor gripe and it's still pretty good. The point is that none of Elika's new powers really add all that much to the gameplay, at least in an enjoyable sense. They feel more like fluff than anything else. This sucks because we already have so little in terms of engaging platforming gameplay that adding more sloppy, mediocre options doesn't bring added value to the game. And while we're talking about Elika, let's stop and take a look at the most broken character in video game history. Elika is like the horrific love child of Ivan Ooze and Third Strike Chun-Li. I've mentioned before that Elika can perform magical feats with the Grace of Ease. She uses these magical abilities to mimic your every acrobatic move. You know, if she wants to bring herself down to your peasant level. She can also fly around anytime she wants, so I assume she mimics you just to make sure the prince doesn't feel too useless. As you may have heard before, you can't die in Prince of Cel-Shading. Anytime you fall from an obstacle, Elika flies over to pick you up, and anytime an enemy is about to deliver the killing blow, Elika intervenes with a magical blast. I really don't have too much of a problem with either of these, because there are legitimate punishments for goofing up. When you fall, you go back to the last bit of solid ground you were on, which means you can have to retraverse a good couple obstacles. And when she intervenes in combat, the enemy gains back health, so it's not exactly a get-out-of-jail-free card. What I do have a bit of a problem with, and I understand this comes off as meaningless griping, but just bear with me, is that I'm trying to figure out how the prince works into the equation. What skills does he bring to the table? What usefulness does he add to the relationship? Elika can perform feats of aerial magic that dwarfs the prince's acrobatics, and in combat she's proven herself to be viable both as a weapon and as the savior to the prince's candy ass anytime he gets whomped. The addition of the power plates only helps the prince in his travels, and once again, all that help is through the use of Elika's powers. I was waiting for there to be something the prince can do that Elika couldn't, something that would justify his place in their relationship. I honestly felt kind of useless playing as the prince in a couple spots, because I was playing second banana to what basically felt like the second coming of Jesus Christ. From Elika's perspective, the whole game must play out like babysitting some butterfingered B-grade adventurer. All I asked was there to be one gameplay element, one something, that gave the prince time to shine. Something that made their relationship feel less one-sided, because the only thing I can think of is the prince being emotional support during the journey. Which, admittedly, is one of the best parts of the game. The interactions between the prince and Elika are some of the most genuine character-building sequences I've gotten to experience in a while. Just watch how gracefully these characters bounce off of each other.
You can see why Ahriman is angry. Trapped for 1,000 years.
It is of his own making. Ormaz and Ahriman are brothers, created to balance the universe. Until Ahriman decided to take it all. The cost was terrible, but eventually Ormaz and the Ura trapped him here in the tree. The world was free of Ahriman. It was supposed to be free forever.
Is there anything we can use with the warrior against Ahriman?
Ahriman kept his promise. The king's people were left by Ahriman's forces, but they are still gone, vanished into history.
You don't act like a princess.
How do princesses act?
All the money, none of the sense. I don't know which end of a camel eats and which end...
I know which end of a camel does what.
A princess.
These conversations aren't just bound strictly to character development, but world lore as well. The prince falls face first into Elika's world, and she does a beautiful job explaining things like the gods Ormazd and Ahriman, the role of the Ura, and what civilization was once like in the area you travel through. There's basically a talk to Elika button, and I spent the game mashing it every time I entered a new area, hoping that Elika would give me more exposition of her world, or that the prince would strike up a casual banter. This was legitimately my main motivation for continuing to play the game. The combat was and the platforming was but I'd gladly go through it for another chance to get these characters to sit down and talk to each other. Another good part of the game is graphic presentation. I may be highly biased on this one because Jet Set Radio is my second favorite game of all time, but I loved the cel-shading art design. While I was originally critical of how everything looked before you heal the fertile grounds in each area, I now accept it since it shows how beautiful everything is in contrast. The world you travel through post-healing is bright and colorful with lots of great design, especially in the bigger levels. The game also runs extremely smooth, which you can't really see because my recording technology is butt cheeks, but take my word on how seamless everything is when it's all moving together. The game's camera even takes over to showcase slow-moving cuts of the environment if you stand still for a good couple minutes. It's a crime that the beauty of these locations are lost when you hop, skip, and jump through pathing so linear it makes House of the Dead 1 look open world. And while we're talking about things this game does that should be considered a crime, let's talk about the light seeds! Yay! Pop quiz, viewers. What is one of the biggest sins in video game design? The prince has the correct answer. And how much did you wager? Collecting light seeds sucks. It is so painfully obvious that this is padding made to extend the length of the game, and because of how mind-shatteringly basic the gameplay and exploration is in Prince of Cel-Shading, this becomes offensive almost immediately. We've already talked about how the exploration is dead in this game because there's only ever one path of obstacles to conquer to get to the next area. Well, when Elika heals the fertile grounds, anywhere from 30 to 45 odd little spheres show up called light seeds. You need to collect the light seeds to boost Elika's power, and when you collect enough you can unlock another one of the little power plate abilities, which also unlocks more fertile grounds for you to heal. So grabbing these light seeds is a vital part of the game, but it completely sucks because there's no exploration in the game, so you just have to go through the same obstacle course you just completed to get these things. To beat the game, you have to go through around half the levels twice, and in case you were wondering, it's not any more fun the second time through. There's other minor gripes, like all the puzzles being weak lever-turning puzzles other than the sluice-gate puzzle, which was actually kind of challenging, or the screen turning gray anytime you make a jump that is too far for you, making you feel like the game is holding your hand like a child, or that the story is more like an afterthought, but the light seeds take the cake. It's just offensive that there's nothing exciting about collecting them. Maybe a couple of them are a little out of the way, but that's honestly a breath of fresh air when considering that the majority are collected just by running through the level a second time. Even with the padding of the light seeds, my playthrough of Prince of Persia lasted only about 10 odd hours, and I was taking my time with it. The game's depth is like a glass bottle surrounded by saran wrap. It doesn't matter how many layers you add, I can still see right through it. It's a shame that the beautiful things about this game are shadowed by how dull actually playing it is. Made even worse when all these things are discovered rather early on and you just complacently have to deal with it for the rest of the experience. The few redeeming qualities in this game stop it from being terrible, but it's still a below average experience that I can't recommend. It does some things right, but the amount of things it gets wrong makes Prince of Persia not worth your time.